we're talking about nonprofits and worker co-ops. So out of curiosity, are there any people who work for nonprofits or representatives of nonprofits in the room right now? Okay, wow, so there's quite a number. Or are other people here interested in partnering with nonprofits to start a cooperative? Okay, great. So this section will be useful to you. Everybody else can just leave the room. No, I'm just kidding. Please stay, just because we'll have food after my presentation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what nonprofits are and why we'd want to think about them and worker cooperatives. So let's go back to our cooperative that we were talking about in the beginning, the Green Commonwealth Landscaping Cooperative. So far, we've been assuming that the members of that cooperative have the capacity or resources to start the business themselves. But what if they really don't? What if they need outside help? This is where a cooperative could really be useful to people who are starting a business. So right now we're going to talk about two situations that a nonprofit could be helpful to you when you're starting a worker co-op. The first is if the nonprofit is just assisting people to start a worker co-op. For example, let's say the Green Commonwealth folks get together. They go and approach the nonprofit for assistance. The second situation is where the nonprofit is actually creating a worker co-op. So why would a nonprofit even want to do this? I think it's probably because a lot of nonprofits, as well as a lot of just everyday people, are realizing that cooperative businesses are a really potent way of creating the society that we want to see. And a lot of nonprofits have that mission as some kind of charitable mission, whether it's helping low-income people to get jobs or training them. And so thinking about creating cooperatives is a good tool for nonprofits to have. So if you're going to think about incubating a co-op, then you need to consider these legal risks. The first is your tax exemption as a nonprofit. Make sure that the activity that you're doing to start a co-op will further your charitable purposes. And you also want to think about liability. Your nonprofit shouldn't become liable for what happens with this co-op that you just started. So what is a nonprofit? There's actually a lot of confusion now, I think, in the world about what it means to be a nonprofit. Nonprofits are actually corporations. They're tax-exempt corporations that are organized and operated exclusively for what are called charitable or educational purposes. These are what the IRS calls exempt purposes. In California, the majority of nonprofits are organized as public benefit corporations. And these are corporations that are organized to meet certain purposes such as a charitable, educational, scientific, or religious purpose. And when we talk about tax exemption, we're talking really about the federal government because the state government largely follows what the federal government decides. So when the IRS grants an organization tax exemption, it's the most common one that we know about that we talk about is called the 501c3. That's a section of the Internal Revenue Code. And 501c3 nonprofits need to be organized exclusively for these purposes. Now, in reality, as you'll see in this presentation, when we say exclusively, those rules are bent a little bit because nonprofits can do a little bit of business which isn't for an exempt purpose. So one thing we should think about is, would co-op development further a nonprofit's charitable purpose? And one thing is think about, would jobs development in low-income communities, could that be something that would be considered a charitable purpose? And then we want to think about this other concept that the IRS cares about, which is called private benefit. And that is that if the IRS is going to grant tax exemption to your organization, it should be serving the public good. It should be making a public benefit. And the IRS is concerned if too much of your resources are actually just benefiting a small group of individuals, private individuals, without a public benefit. Now, the good thing about that, there's an exception to that general rule of private benefit, which is called the charitable class. So if these people who are private individuals and being benefited by the nonprofit's work are part of a charitable class of people, for example, disadvantaged people, low-income people, other terms that the IRS uses are poor and distressed. They use pretty outdated language. But if they're part of that class of people, then it's okay if they receive a benefit, because actually that's the purpose of these nonprofits in the first place, is to benefit people. Now you want to be careful that you're not just taking 3 people and naming them and saying that they're going to be the beneficiaries of this nonprofit. That's not how you should do it. You should say we're benefiting in general disadvantaged people, people who live in Richmond and are disadvantaged. That's the purpose of this nonprofit. And that would be much more likely to pass as a tax-exempt or charitable purpose. So let's say we wanted to go to a nonprofit. We want to approach Green Commonwealth. We realize we could probably fit into the charitable purpose of some nonprofit organization. So we're going to approach a local group. It's called Jobs Now. It's a nonprofit, and its goal is to help East Bay low-income communities start their own businesses and provide assistance to groups of people who want to start businesses. Now, as members of the Green Commonwealth, this new cooperative, we are low-income people. In fact, we're day laborers, and we are basically looking for work, and we fit into what the charitable class would be for what the nonprofit want to serve. So I think we should think about whether should Jobs Now assist us. Well, first we would consider that we are private individuals, but we're also in a charitable class. Then we want to think of, does it further Jobs Now's tax-exempt purpose? Well, yeah, I think it does, because Jobs Now is all about providing training and jobs development services to low-income people. So, yeah, I think this would be a good fit. So Green Commonwealth should probably go to Jobs Now, and Jobs Now could consider whether they should assist this. Now, what kind of services could Jobs Now provide to Green Commonwealth? Those are things you could think about, such as helping the cooperative to organize, providing business training, assistance with maintaining their finances and accounting, training on how to do financing and accounting. There's a whole host of services that the nonprofit could provide. What about money? Can Jobs Now provide money to Green Commonwealth? Yeah, but you should be more careful about this, because as a nonprofit, there's a lot of rules about how you disperse your money, and the IRS's guards will go up even further if you're just giving out money freely to individuals. So you could make grants, document and have a clear process for making grants to worthy individuals who are part of a charitable class. You could set up loans and think about how you're going to structure the loans. Are they going to be at a reduced rate of loan because you're helping low-income people? And maybe one day, as the Commonwealth Cooperative becomes successful, you could even have a provision that you're going to repay that loan, maybe at a market interest rate, back to the nonprofit. That's all legit. The nonprofit can do those types of activities. So now let's go to another scenario. So Jobs Now decided to help Green Commonwealth with its cooperative. What if Jobs Now wanted to create its own cooperative? So there are 2 types of businesses that nonprofits can generally start. They're called related businesses and unrelated businesses. The IRS has really simple, clear terminology. Not true at all. So let's go back to this idea of what the tax-exempt nonprofit corporation is. It's organized and operated exclusively for a charitable or educational purpose. Now, if you're going to have a related business, it's pretty narrow what you can do, because that business needs to fit inside that yellow box. That small green box is actually part of your mission. It's furthering what you call your charitable purpose. So here we say the IRS's rules on that are that it should be substantially related to the actions of your nonprofit. It must contribute importantly to and have a substantial causal relationship, and it shouldn't be larger than its scope or is necessary. So let's think about, what does that mean? So if your nonprofit, going back to Jobs Now, wanted to create something, Jobs Now should think about, what is the co-op going to do? How is it going to earn money? Is it going to compete in the market with other for-profit businesses? And is it just going to make money? And then the money goes back into the nonprofit? That's probably not going to be a related business. Rather, you should show something additional, not just that you're competing in the market, but rather that you're showing that you're training and employing low-income people to be part of this business. And that's furthering your exempt purpose, which is to train and employ low-income people. Or that you're offering low-cost services to those people who can't afford them, or targeting your assistance to low-income people. All of those are things that would point to the fact that this isn't just another for-profit business, but rather it's something that's really related to why you exist as a nonprofit. And so the important thing to think about there is that it's not what you do with your money. It's not whether or not you're funneling all those funds back into the nonprofit's purposes. It's how you earn the money. That's what the IRS really cares about, because they don't want you to be another for-profit business competing in the marketplace, but having the extra advantage that you're tax exempt. So let's say, okay, so you should be aware that not all job training businesses that a nonprofit could start are tax exempt. In fact, the IRS has conflicting rules on this. The IRS would look at, does it compete with for-profit businesses? Does it make a profit? Offer any low-cost services? And just what I said before, it's not what you do with the money, but how you earn it. So let's say you do end up wanting to start a business, but it's not going to be related. In fact, all you want to do is make money to support your activities. That's also okay. That's called an unrelated business, and that's not furthering your tax-exempt purpose. Now, the rule about that is that you should not let that. It should only be an insubstantial amount of your activities, and that's measured in terms of the use of your organization's resources and the time. So when we say insubstantial, we mean it's about no more than 15%. Now, if it does start becoming more substantial, then you might want to think about the fact that that's going to start threatening your tax-exempt status. That's because the IRS is going to say, this is a tax-exempt business that's running a really big for-profit business. It's not furthering its mission. Maybe it shouldn't be tax-exempt anymore. That's what they're going to start thinking. So in that case, what you should do is probably create a subsidiary. A subsidiary is another business that's okay if it's for-profit. It could be a corporation or an LLC. And the way that works is that the nonprofit wholly controls and owns that business. But the subsidiary pays taxes to the IRS. So then the IRS is okay, it's happy. But then the subsidiary passes on dividends based on stock ownership back to the nonprofit. So that's how the nonprofit's making money. So these are all pretty complicated things you should talk to a lawyer about, but I just want you to know that these are the options available to nonprofits. And then we want to think about, okay, so this nonprofit wants to start a co-op, but is a co-op really a subsidiary? If you go back and think about what I said about a subsidiary, it's usually controlled by the nonprofit. And if the whole point of a worker co-op is that it's owned and governed by its workers, then it starts to smell fishy to have if you have a nonprofit with a co-op subsidiary. So maybe rather than starting a subsidiary, the nonprofit should consider taking steps that would preserve why the nonprofit even got into this project in the first place. The nonprofit is trying to help people start their own business that's cooperatively run and managed. Then the nonprofit should take steps to make sure that this business continues to be cooperatively run and managed. So appointing the board of directors, then having the power to veto certain decisions, such as, should our co-op sell to Walmart? I mean, sell the whole entire business to Walmart. Or having a contract with the co-op that allows the nonprofit to retain certain rights over the co-op's business, but otherwise give the rest of the control to the workers. Because you want to be careful of how much the nonprofit actually controls the co-op. This would violate co-op principles of workers governing, and also the IRS doesn't like seeing outsiders controlling a worker co-op and not the members controlling it. Finally, a thing you should all be concerned about, and if you are thinking about getting into this, I really highly recommend you go to the nonprofit breakout group, is whether your nonprofit has the capacity and resources and commitment to actually start one of these projects, because it requires a lot of time and commitment, and it's a long-term project. And so we would love to discuss that more with you in the breakout session. And there's some great organizations that are working on this in the Bay Area. Wages, who's represented here in the breakout session, the Clean and Green Jobs. Mandela Foods, we have a member in the Clean and Green Jobs also. And then there's some organizations here that are provide support to nonprofits that are thinking about this type of work, such as CCCD, US Federation, and NoBAWC. And of course, if you need legal assistance, come talk to us at the East Bay Community Law Center or Sustainable Economies Law Center. Thanks.